Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. In this podcast, you will discover interviews with procurement and technical experts, business owners, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. These experts will help you to develop and grow, accelerate your career, improve your business, save money, and buy smart. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello, and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. For anyone wishing to move up in their career or are in the unfortunate position to be unemployed, maximizing the opportunity for you to find and secure a job may well be high on your agenda. Other than creating your CV and sending them to multiple recruitment agencies, one platform you may choose to share your skills on could be LinkedIn. But unless you are familiar with this platform and are great at self-promotion, how do you ensure you showcase yourself in a manner worthy of your talents? So today, I'm super excited to introduce you to Daniel Alphon, the author of Build a LinkedIn Profile for Business Success. Daniel joined LinkedIn in early 2004 and publishes articles, interviews, and exclusive content about advanced LinkedIn strategies for clients and subscribers of his website. A particular statement Daniel made to me on our first contact was, doesn't one want to create options for oneself and not bet one's future on a single supplier? In other words, your employer. And that statement struck me. So without any further delay, I welcome Daniel onto the podcast. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Dave. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be part of the Real Life Buyer.
Thanks very much. So, as we're talking resumes, how about you share yours with my listeners and explain how and why you settled into this area of expertise?
With pleasure. I got my first sales job back in 2006, and it was the first time I had to carry quota, and I was scared. I was scared to death because the initial first weeks were challenging. And at one time, LinkedIn showed me the name of a potential distributor I was looking for. And because me and my colleagues, half our time was dedicated to find the right person within the organization, that simply cut half my sales cycle. So I invested more time into it, and LinkedIn has proven to be a wonderful, powerful, and counterintuitive platform. And gradually I have started helping friends, and those friends asked me to train their staff, and I'm happy to specialize in the world's largest LinkedIn platform, business platform, almost 820 million users, to people signing up each second.
Yeah, it's certainly grown in its profile for sure. And it's the only business profile I ever look at myself, to be honest. So it has a unique position, probably one would say. So I see it's been said that LinkedIn should be considered and treated as a search engine, and therefore SEO and keywords must be considered. So when building or updating one's own profile, what recommendations can you share with the audience to help optimize their presence and stand out from the crowd?
With pleasure, Dave. That's very true. Are performed on the platform every year. So the simple thing to do is to ask oneself, what position will I be looking for? I could be a senior buyer. I could be head of purchasing. Each listener should decide what title they would look at in the near future, and then simply analyze or suggest a three-step process. Analyze current job openings for the senior director of purchasing or strategic procurement or whatever the title may be. And what I would suggest, Dave, is to elicit or extract 20 to 25 keywords from each job description. And if you do it for, say, 3 job descriptions, you'll have a bank of at least 50 keywords. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is going back to your LinkedIn profile or your CV, if you'd like, and cross out the terms that are already present. So procurement may be there, but so sometimes you'll see that the term buyer is nowhere on your profile, nowhere on your CV. So you keep those terms and you end up with a short list. You look for procurement and buyer and purchasing and product and business and supply chain and senior and project, indirect, direct, negotiating, price, cost, competitive, million, cost reduction, NPI, whatever you think are terms that are relevant for your future position. And then out of the terms that are not on your profile, you pick the ones you think are most interesting and are most likely to be found in in other people's profile and part of the search. Say I wanted to include the term supply chain or include the term cost reduction. Then my question would be, Dave, where have you reduced cost the most? Perhaps it's the current position. Perhaps it was a project you did 2 years ago. It doesn't matter. Searches on LinkedIn run from the very top of your profile to the very bottom. So don't try to, I would advise our listeners here not to try to game the system, but to be authentic. Where do you think that term is most logically placed? And put it there. It could be, even if it's something you don't feel comfortable including in your experience section, you can include it in the skills section. Or maybe you've taken a course about it. There are many ways that are still authentic to include the term. And that will mean that whenever someone runs a search for a head of procurement or a senior buyer, instead of being in page 25, you'll come closer to page number 1. Simple process, extract 20 to 25 keywords from 2 to 3 job descriptions, cross the ones that are already on your profile, and place strategically the terms that are important and not present on your profile.
Okay. So just trying to get my head around that then. So you've got to be careful, I guess, which 3 profiles you measure yourself against. So I guess they should be something that if you were looking to recruit somebody in that position, those resumes, those profiles would jump out at you and think, wow, this guy sounds, or lady, should I say, sounds pretty good. You know, they sound like they've covered all the key areas. So that's the principle. So you should be selective on who you choose to model, I guess, that impress you, and then say pick out those words that add the gravitas perhaps to your CV. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, that's absolutely right. Maybe I'd like to add one more sentence. What I suggested initially was simply extract terms out of the job descriptions, not people.
Right. Okay. Job descriptions. Yeah.
So the job description for the senior buyer would have all sorts of terms. You extract 20 to 25 keywords, not from people, but from detailed job descriptions. And then you go to a profile. But what you suggested is actually the 4th and ideal step. So maybe we could dive into it a bit.
Sure.
After you've done everything we've suggested, then looking up people with certain keywords will also be helpful. Now, why is that, Dave? Because even if you looked at a number of job descriptions, sometimes only when you visit someone's profile and you look at a certain word and you then ask yourself, wow, how have I forgotten this term? And you thank the lady or the gentleman, you go back to your profile and you answer truthfully. Where can that term be placed once in my profile? Now, why is that? Because whenever someone runs a search and they find you, they no longer are looking for the term. They're just asking yourself, is Dave the right buyer for me? Is Dave the right head of procurement for me? So once you make them visit your profile, it has to make them understand that you're the solution to their problem. And deciding what seniority level is relevant for you and what is the likely title of the position you'll be looking for. I think I look at it as a sort of in what they have, but in some cases we need to move on, and it's best to be prepared.
Okay, that's some interesting advice there. It's not something I thought of as well, looking at both job descriptions and people and trying to find that good blend, because I've seen a number of job descriptions for various roles over the years, and some clearly are more articulate than others. So, there's some thought to be applied, isn't it? Okay, but when I used to apply for job roles, I've been fortunate to be employed for quite a long time now. But in the old days, shall we say, these sort of things appeared in the newspaper, in magazines, or you would see them on the recruiters' websites. So it's what I was taught as a young man, should we say, when I used to consider applying for a job with somebody, I'd undertake my research and I would tailor my application letter and my CV to the person or the company that I was applying to. So in other words, I'd consider the specific audience that was going to receive my information. But you can't, I don't think you can anyway, do that on LinkedIn. You have a static, what I call a static profile. And so no matter where the people, the audience were coming from, they would look at the same information. And in some ways you think, well, is that a little bit counterintuitive? because I can no longer tailor for the role I really want to apply for. They've got this static profile. So how does one handle that on LinkedIn and the platform?
I think you're absolutely right. We can no longer do this. Gone are the days where we could tailor a resume in a significant way, because most companies, Dave, will go to visit your LinkedIn profile somewhere during the process. Some companies may choose to visit your profile before they interview the candidate. Others would look into your profile before making you an offer. But most companies at one stage will look at your profile, and then they ask themselves generally two questions. One, is the resume that you submitted 100% compatible and aligned with what you posted on LinkedIn? And my strongest advice would be to minimize the gap and to have no difference whatsoever. It's more difficult, but it makes you pick up one specialty if you like, or one type of position. But if you think about the term you want to use, have zero gaps. If you split a position in your resume and you call it director or your profile says manager, then the person reading this is asking themselves, why do we have an issue here? Why has that person written X here and Y there? And often it's simply a lack of time or lack of thought, but it would make everyone try to question your authenticity, and it's not worth it. Think about it, have one presence, and then duplicate it to your CV. Zero contradiction, zero difference, zero gap. If it's important enough to be part of your profile, it's important enough to be part of your CV. And I would advise our listeners to use strictly the same terms, the same name of the employers, and the same periods of time. Because you will not be there to say, no, that company was acquired and it was actually 2015. It doesn't matter. Zero gaps. Think about it, and don't make people move on to someone else simply because you're not there to answer their question. Your profile, in a word, should speak for itself.
Yeah. I've had the fortune to review quite a few CVs over my lifetime, and I must admit that I often will find gaps. I'm looking for the things that are not obvious, shall we say. So if somebody has left a role and 6 months later they started a new role, the immediate question is, well, what do you do for that 6 months? I see that time and time again. And sometimes even, the companies cross over. So they have dates from start and finish in one company, and then they're different dates. They think, well, you can't work at the same different company at the same time. So why are these dates overlapping? So you say it's attention to detail is what the person who's looking to employ somebody is looking for. And if things don't add up, then you can't help but question, the integrity of the information, the effort that's gone into creating that information for people to review. So, it's a common mistake I see. Okay, this is talking about, or appears to be, a strategy developing here. So you talked about where to go and find keywords, how to structure perhaps and date and make sure the names are consistent. There's a lot of consistency here. So is this forming a strategy of how to do things? And if so, what other steps would you say are in that strategy and what you should apply at least to LinkedIn? What should go in about forming and refining this strategy?
With pleasure. I think there are two pillars that will make candidates more attractive to the employers. Number one is having a profile that screams interview me. So if you focus on the sort of position you're after, say supply chain manager in a mid-sized importer based in Sussex, then within 5 seconds, when I glance at your profile, I need to make a decision that I want to learn more about you. And I need to scroll and I need to see what you're doing now. And then at the end of reading, I need to say, yes, I want to reach out to that candidate. So that's the first element, having a profile that says, I am the answer to what you're looking for. And the second, who you'd like to connect with on LinkedIn. Some people will connect with people they know well, and other people will connect with people they don't necessarily know well. My piece of advice would be to connect with people you know well. Now, why is that? Because whenever a hiring manager or a recruiter or a placement agency, like you said, are looking you up, if you share a mutual connection or several mutual connections with that person, then they see the names of the mutual connections. And Dave, neither you nor me will be there to say them, don't ask Jane, ask Dave, because Dave is the one I really know. And trouble is, if they ask Jane and Jane doesn't know enough about you, then their decision is less likely to be to interview that person. And it's a myth and a mistake to try to connect with people you don't know well when you're looking for a job, because the good news is that you will not look for a job long enough to benefit from this. And your connection strategy, in my opinion, should not be influenced by conjecture. You may look for a job for 2 months, 4 months, whatever, but your use of LinkedIn could stretch for years and years to come. So think about it this way. Once I land my new position, do I want to be most connected or do I want to be best connected? And do it on a consistent way. It doesn't matter if you're looking for a job or if you're happily employed. Stick to one policy. My policy is connecting with people I know well.
Okay. It's quite difficult though, isn't it? If you're in let's say a considered to be a secure position, you've been in the role for some years. Certainly as a buyer, then I'm approached predominantly by two types of people. Firstly, recruiters, funnily enough, and secondly, salespeople who obviously want to make contact and see if there's an opportunity to make a sale. And in those cases, probably in both of those cases, neither of them you know particularly well at that given point in time. But you may see a potential opportunity with the supplier, for example, that you want to explore. And the only way to communicate then is obviously be properly connected and explore that avenue. So as you rightly say, it could be a very tenuous relationship at the beginning that develops, or it could go nowhere. It's hard to determine how you're going to go. How do you make that decision at the time?
Can I suggest a quick thing here? When you look at incoming invitations, then LinkedIn will typically show you two options: accept or ignore. But next time you get an invitation, I'd like you to go to your laptop, go on desktop and click on see more on the top right. And when you do that, LinkedIn will show you the word message. So if it's a recruiter or a salesperson, what you could do, Dave, and what our listeners here could do is simply reply. Thank you very much, Robert, for trying to connect. I don't remember having spoken with you. Can I be of help to you or XYZ Incorporated? If the conversation makes sense because it's a recruiter and you started to look for a position, or it's a salesperson and you are actually interested in their product, then please treat the LinkedIn invitation simply as an email. You would reply and require more information. So do that. And if you happily know that person, maybe down the road in 6 months' time, after you've met them and you had a coffee or beer, maybe you will connect on LinkedIn. But revenues and cost reduction and new suppliers are more important than LinkedIn connections and likes and share. What's key is real life metric, not LinkedIn metrics.
Okay. So having lots of connections don't really give you any benefits whatsoever then, especially if they're tenuous, should we say?
If you reach 30,000 connections, then you get exposure. The danger zone is to have 2, 3, 4, 5,000 connections, because on the one hand, you don't have a lot of exposure. And on the other hand, you may have polluted the quality of your network. So going all the way to the quantity aspect can work for many people, but I mean 30,000 connections. And if you're not there, then that's not real exposure.
Right. Okay. It's interesting, but you can't really go backwards, can you, sensibly? If you can, I suppose, disconnect from people, but is that a good thing or a bad thing as well then?
Let's say that prevention is usually easier than cure. So just deciding what you would do from now on is what we could, Then what you could do is go over the list of those 200 people, interesting or intriguing. And what you could do is message those people here, and I see that you're with the University of Sussex, and I was wondering about this or that. If you manage to engage with them in a meaningful way, then you turn that virtual connection into a real-life connection. But if they don't reply, or the reply is rude or unprofessional, then I think disconnecting may be the right choice for you.
Okay, thanks for that. So let's assume that somebody decides that they're looking or need to look for a new role. They want to change what they're doing. They want to upskill in some way or something. And so they decide they want to look there out in the world for a different position. How do they go about making a confidential search? They don't want to necessarily publish to their employer that looking for something different in life. What's your suggestions?
It's a very powerful question. And the best piece of advice I could give is keep your LinkedIn profile up to date on a regular basis when you're happily employed. And that means having a recurring event in your calendar every 3 months. It could take 15 minutes. Look at your current employer description on LinkedIn and see whether you'd like to change something. In some cases, you'll change nothing. And maybe in 6 months time, there is a new project. So you will try to add maybe one bullet about that project, maybe one term, maybe one keyword. And that also means, Dave, that when you get incoming inquiries from recruiters, they are more aligned with what you're doing today. Whereas if you forgot about LinkedIn for 3 years and then you try to write your profile, unfortunately, it will take you time to write a good description of your current position. And people who don't know you are only thinking about what you're doing now. So doing it when you don't need to is way less time consuming, way better, and will give you much better results than trying to rush things when you have your back to the wall. The second piece of advice I could give is analyzing our network, going to on desktop, clicking on the My Network, the second from left in the top navigation bar, and clicking on a number of connections on the left, and say rearrange them by first name or last name. And every year, maybe, go over the list, and you would sometimes discover that someone you thought was with supplier X has moved to a different company. So it's better for you to actually know what they're doing and what is your network up to. And in some cases, if your job search has become more acute, so shall we say, then you could identify maybe 10% of those people, maybe VIP connections. And I would advise our listeners here to reach out outside of LinkedIn to those people. Whenever you connected with someone, in 99% of the cases, under their contact info, you'll see their email. Whatever email they use, leave LinkedIn and have a meaningful conversation. Sometimes it could be a Zoom call. In other cases, it could be a coffee when you're meeting them or attending an industry event. And maybe they could also, our listeners here could join the procurement and supply chain community on Facebook, which I hear is doing well.
Indeed. Thanks. So I just think now that there are often roles, the sort of hidden roles out there that are not necessarily advertised. But the question is, how do you get to find out these hidden roles, these word of mouth roles that aren't necessarily put out there as a nice big splash advert? Are you able to look for these sort of roles on LinkedIn in some way? How do you discover these hidden roles?
Wow, that's the questions keep getting more and more interesting. So I think that's a good question any talent should ask themselves. And LinkedIn does not cover all the jobs that are out there. Even within LinkedIn, the funny thing is, if I ask you where you would find the jobs, then most people will say under LinkedIn jobs. But the truth, Dave, is that only 10% of jobs on LinkedIn are under jobs. Because what we see under jobs are paid jobs. So the employer would pay LinkedIn for us to find it under jobs. But most of the jobs are actually published or shared within specialty groups. So it could be a UK supply chain management group or a buyer group. And then, because it's free, you'll find hundreds of jobs. So that's not exactly confidential jobs, but way more jobs than what you see on the job section. And if I can suggest another radical idea, instead of looking for jobs and then thinking whether that company is interesting, and lastly, ask ourselves, do I know someone who could make an introduction? Start with people you know, see where they work and who they can introduce you to. Start thinking in terms of because in some cases, the company you'd like to work for has not advertised any job, but the COO or the person you're likely to report to is looking for someone. And the HR will not know it because there's an organizational change, or some person is moving, and they're actually looking for a senior buyer or a senior manager. And if you get introduced to that person, then you are competing in an environment where in some cases, Dave, you'll be the only person there. And it's way better than waiting 2 months and having a job description and you'll be number 425 knocking on the door and saying, It's really the difference between having the RFP or the tender written or characterizing and writing the RFP yourself.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I'd never realized that. And only 10%, that's quite an extremely low figure. I'm blown away by that. Okay. So let's assume now you find, for whatever reason, your ideal role. Is there a tactical approach you could take that help to make sure you are at least one of the key candidates that are called up for an interview? Is there something you could do that influence that in some way?
Let's discuss things that are within our control. Some things are obviously not. But what I would advise our listeners here is usually to bypass HR and to try to get introduced to the hiring manager. Because people who tend to share the jobs themselves are usually in-house recruiters, and they see their job as selecting the few people who cross all the right qualifications. And the funny thing is that if we were both interviewing for a supply chain manager in a company, and the hiring manager and the recruiter would look at both our CVs, sometimes the HR manager or the recruiter will look at it and say, no, Daniel, Dave, they're not qualified. I'm not going to start the process with them. And the hiring manager is going to look at your profile or CV and say, I want to interview that person. That happens because the recruiter deals in many cases with many positions. They're not really aware of what you will do on your job, and they stick to the job description. If the qualification says 5 years of indirect procurement and you don't show that, or you show it in terms they don't understand, in many cases, unfortunately, you will not move on. But the hiring manager look at what you've done and say, if you've done that, I want to interview you. So try to bypass, and LinkedIn actually enables you to do that. By running a simple search, you can look at the University of Sussex and find that Phil is the hiring manager. This is the most important person in your job search, not a recruiter, not other people. Try to see if you find someone who can introduce you to that person. And another thing which you could do simply and freely is visit the hiring manager publicly on LinkedIn. By publicly, I mean enabling them to see that you have visited their profile. I advise people to do that once their profile screams, I'm interviewing me, okay? But generally speaking, that's free, it's simple, and that could sometimes mean they will extend an invitation connection to you, or they will start the process with you, even if you send your resume 10 days ago and nothing happened. Once they check you out, they decide that they want to interview you, and someone from the company will suggest to have a quick Zoom call.
That's some great advice there. Yes, thanks for that. Some thought-provoking things. Fantastic. Now, some things you just mentioned there, we mentioned the word free. One of the things that I regularly receive, and I'm sure other people do, is the option to upgrade to the premium version. Now, what does the premium version really give you? What advantage does it have in paying for the features and benefits that come with that upgrade? What would you say, is it a sensible and a beneficial thing to do to upgrade, or what's your thought on it?
My thought is that you don't need to pay for LinkedIn before you master the free platform really well. So the currency I think you need to invest initially, at least, is time. What would happen if both of us signed up for LinkedIn and we paid? Then actually we would not be able to appreciate what we got, because we've never experienced the limits of the free account. The free account is so overwhelming, so rich, so confusing, and with so many possibilities that paying for a premium account should only happen once you know the platform well. And maybe by that time you say, yes, I want to try that month. And since LinkedIn has proven to be, if I pay 200 pounds, I know what I'm getting. Fine. But if you don't understand what you're getting, I don't think it's a wise investment.
Okay. It's always intriguing to know that, or you have the expectation that suddenly a whole host of things are going to appear before you that you never realized were there. So, as you say, you're right, it is extremely rich. There's lots of information in there. It can be a little bit confusing. And I haven't noticed, perhaps I've just missed it, but I don't remember seeing lots of tutorials on how to get the best out of LinkedIn. Is that something that they offer out of curiosity, or have I just missed it?
I don't think it's LinkedIn offers a lot of onboarding guides to LinkedIn. Maybe they want to keep my business alive. I'm not sure. Maybe they'll do it as soon as the episode is released. But for now, LinkedIn has proven to be a less than stellar teacher about its own platform.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good introduction to the fact that your skills and services are available. So if people want to find out more about yourself, your business, how they can consume your content, hire your services, how are they best going about that?
Thank you very much. The best place to go is my website, and that's danielalfon.com, Daniel, ALFON.com. There are free articles there. They can jump in and schedule a one-on-one call. There's a giveaway, a cheat sheet really about improving one's profile headline. And if they can also message me and say, I listened to the episode you have today with the real life bio, and I have a question, and I promise I'll try to get back to them as soon as possible.
Brilliant. So looking at the time, one last question, if I may slip that in at the end. So as an expert on LinkedIn, what features do you see people missing, or at least techniques that people should apply to help them enhance their presence and gravitas on the platform that we haven't discussed?
I'm glad you're bringing that subject. There are many nuggets out there. I'll mention briefly 2 or 3 of them. Articles, what LinkedIn call LinkedIn articles, are a good way to build or strengthen your thought leadership on LinkedIn. The difference between a post and an article being that posts are usually more time sensitive. Okay, you're looking for XYZ, you have an event coming and you will use it as a post, whereas the evergreen content, trends in your industry, or maybe the implications of the situation in Ukraine or Southeast Asia, that could be a long form content, articles. And another benefit of sharing articles is that if you share an external link, then the LinkedIn algorithm does not want people to leave the platform. So they're not going to show it to everyone you're connected with. Whereas when you share a LinkedIn article, then the algorithm realizes people will stay within the gated garden of LinkedIn, and people are likelier to discover that. They're more, I'm going to put an article about video cover, a simple way for you to have a video playing whenever someone visits your profile. And having a banner is also something that could take you maybe a minute to upload. It could be like you have on your own profile. Your banner says today is opportunity to build a tomorrow we want for ourselves and humanity. So every listener could decide whether they'd like a quote or a landscape or themselves with suppliers, whatever they feel like it, but it gives more personality to the profile itself. And knowing when to leave LinkedIn is what I will leave you with. If you find someone interesting and you see that you share a mutual connection, leave LinkedIn, speak with that mutual connection. And in many cases, Dave, that could lead into a real life, meaningful introduction that will either bring you a new opportunity in terms of your employment or in terms of a supplier, a partner, or an employee.
Brilliant. That's great. Well, thank you very much for your time. That's been a lot of food for thought there, and I'm sure people will be asking you some questions after this. So it's been a lovely experience to have a chat with you. Perhaps we could have a chat another time. And thanks very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. It was great to be part of the Real Life Bio, Dave. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
So there's another Real Life Bio podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.